Thanks, Chair. Much appreciated. I've got a couple of questions that relate to Australia's foreign aid into Gaza. Who would be the best person to take those on?
Mr. Innes-Brown, come up, Senator.
Great, thank you. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Innes-Brown. Do you want to just state your position for us? Can you just, state your position for us?
Sure. Mark Innes-Brown, First Assistant Secretary, Middle East and Africa Division.
Great, thank you. Can you just confirm for me that the 15-16 budget cut aid to the Palestinian territories from 34.2 million to 20.5? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right.
That's correct. What components of Australia's contribution to that part of the world did that hit in particular?
Senator, I'm not sure if you were here earlier, but in relation to the 15-16 budget allocations which were announced, the best part of 3 weeks ago, we're now going through discussions with our partner governments on the priorities for 15-16. So when they're complete, we'll be able to provide that information to you.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, we'll take that on notice.
I should add, Senator, I'll be travelling to the Palestinian territories in 2 weeks to go through all of this.
You will be?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give us a rough idea of who you're likely to meet with while you're there?
I don't have a program at the moment, but senior officials in the Palestinian Authority.
Okay. I also understand that that Australia committed, I don't know whether it was an additional, you might be able to clarify that for me, $5 million to assist with the rebuilding of Gaza, which was very, very badly damaged last year. Was that $5 million, did that come from a humanitarian fund or a separate appropriation, or was that out of our regular aid contribution?
No, that came, that's right, it was 5.7 million.
5.7.
And it came from our existing appropriation for the Palestinian territories.
Okay. Has that aid money actually been able to reach Gaza?
I'd have to take the details on notice, but the money went to UNRWA, which is UNRWA, which has a trust, which has a fund which is organising assistance for people who were affected by the conflict last year. So whether they've dispersed the money at this stage or not, I don't know. I'll have to take it on notice, Senator.
Well, have they reported any difficulties in implementing Australia's aid projects into that area?
Not specifically, no.
They haven't specifically reported any difficulties since the war last year?
No, there's some obviously general difficulties.
How would you describe those general difficulties to us?
Well, I gave evidence on an earlier question, Senator, but in terms of reconstruction of Gaza, there are a range of challenges, and including in delivering money and also materials into Gaza. So I can go through those again, but if you like. First of all is that the fact that the Palestinian Authority hasn't been able to take control of the reconstruction effort in Gaza because Hamas has refused to relinquish that. There's also, Israel, understandably for security reasons, is scrutinising materials that go in, including because of the history of what has happened to construction materials in the past. Another issue is that there was a conference in Cairo after the conflict, and only about 26% of the contributions that were made by donors have yet been paid. However, there has been some general progress. As I reported earlier, UNRWA has been able to assist about 60,000 families, almost half the caseload of displaced refugee families, to help them repair their homes.
What effect is the blockade of Gaza having on Australia's aid program to this area?
It's not, to my knowledge, Senator, it's not having any specific impact. None has been brought to my attention.
You say you can clarify your language if you like, that materials being scrutinised or checked for security purposes before it enters the Palestinian territories.
There's a
This is Australian aid and reconstruction materials is being scrutinised before it can pass into the country.
what I was saying, there is a thing called the UN Materials Monitoring Unit, which it's a tripartite arrangement between Israel and the Palestinian territories and the UN, which is a mechanism set up to scrutinise all construction materials going into Gaza.
Okay. So, just to be clear, you haven't had it reported to you. When's the last time you visited that part of the world?
I haven't visited. I'm planning to visit in 2 weeks.
Yeah, so you've not been there before?
Yeah.
Okay.
My staff have.
And do they? I'm a bit surprised, I must admit, that you don't report any impact of the blockade of
Not
those
specifically
territories.
affecting our projects that we're funding, but none has been specifically brought to my attention.
What about generally?
I just went through that, Senator. I did explain that there is a process of stuff going in, and it has generally been slow for the reasons I outlined before.
Sure. Has Australia made any representation specifically either to Israel or to Egypt to allow reconstruction materials to more easily enter those territories?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Not to your knowledge. Is that something that you could check for us?
I can check, sure. Take that on notice.
In the context of the destruction of a large part of those areas and the very clear humanitarian need, why did the 2015 budget reduce aid to the Palestinian territories?
Senator, if I can just clarify.
Yep.
Earlier we talked about the funding for 15-16 to the Palestinian territories. That was the question you asked at the beginning. There was also some humanitarian assistance, as Mr Ennis-Brown talked about, of $5.7 million.
But that came from within the existing...
Yep, and there's also core funding that we provide to UNRWA, which we provided $20.3 million last year, and we're providing $19.3 million next financial year as well.
Okay. So maybe I'm happy to put the question to you if you'd rather take it. Why did
sure.
the 2015-16 budget reduce aid to those territories, given the extraordinary scale of the need?
Senator, in terms of the humanitarian need, overall the humanitarian budget was reduced by a very small amount.
And I'm asking the reasons why. I would have thought, given that the place was virtually pulverised during the last financial year, that maybe an increase in aid would be in order.
Senator, as you know, in my EFO, the aid budget was reduced.
It was.
Government had to make decisions around the allocations. What
Okay.
I've said is a humanitarian area, which is what we're talking about now in terms of the response, was preserved in that and had a small reduction, as I said earlier, from $338 million to $328 million. And as part of that UNRWA, which we provide core funding, which is the most effective form of funding, as you know, for agencies, humanitarian agencies, we reduced that by $1 million for next year.
Okay. The Foreign Minister of Germany recently called for the lifting of the blockade. Has the Australian Foreign Minister made any representations to this effect?
In response to those comments by the German Foreign Minister?
Yeah, that's worth making the distinction. Either in response to those comments from the German...
not in response to them, no.
Sorry?
Not in response to those particular comments.
Okay, but that's clear. Has the Australian Foreign Minister or any other official made any representations to this effect, that the blockade be lifted?
I'll have to take that on notice, what discussions we've had about that over recent years.
I would appreciate that. Are you familiar with the report released by the World Bank on the 21st of May that indicated that Gaza's economy is on the brink of collapse? It has the world's highest unemployment rate, 80% of its citizens are relying on international aid, and that only a quarter of the funds pledged have been honoured. Now, you referenced that latter point in some of your earlier remarks, but are you aware of that report by the World Bank?
I'm aware of the headline conclusions, the headline points of it. I do recall reading it.
you read the headline conclusions or the document itself?
I counted them somewhere. I don't actually recall, but I'm aware of their general conclusions. Yes, that's right.
Okay, so you're aware that the general conclusion was that recovery of the shattered economy of that part of the world is only possible, says the World Bank, with the easing of the blockade to allow sufficient reconstruction materials in and exports out. Effectively, the economy is being starved.
What I'll have to read the full report and.
Is that an undertaking that you're making to us to do?
Sure.
If you think it's worth your time.
No, happy to.
Okay. I think I might leave it there on Gaza, and I'm very keen to hear, because I find it actually very difficult to believe, and you've given us some general undertakings that are around security checks for materials entering into the Palestinian territories, and you've said you're not aware of any specific issues. I find that actually really difficult to believe. So I just ask you to take on notice to find out from our partners, whether it be UNRWA, World Vision or AFIDA or any of the other groups that we have relevant linkages with, whether they are reporting, if you're able to just actively check for us,
Sure.
any difficulties in delivering aid to a part of the world that desperately needs it.
Will do.
I'd greatly appreciate that. Chair, I've got other questions that relate to other parts of the world, so I'm in your hands.
Well, I was going to go to Senator Xenophon about 10 to 9, so do you want to kick on now or do you want to...
I can. I've got some brief questions which might actually be very brief.
All right, let's do those for 5 minutes if we can, and go to Senator Xenophon.
That will probably do it, because it may not be something that the department's got carriage of. Could you just tell us what involvement the department has, if any, in the review of the PKK's listing as a terrorist organisation which I understand, organisation in Australia, its status within this country? I understand that review process is due in August of this year, and it's probably ASIO that has direct carriage of it, but whether the department has any visibility of that review process.
It is ASIO that is responsible for advising on the listing of terrorist organisations, Senator, as you may know, and that's a question that could have been asked in Attorney General's estimates.
Senator Brandis, are you checking your notes because you might provide us with some useful information? Or
Well, I'm just
Great,
having
thanks.
a look. I'm just having a look to see if there's anything
that's much
bearing
appreciated.
upon this department that we can tell you about, Senator. But Mr. Varghese might know.
I'm not. I mean, I'm obviously aware of our role in terms of our own departmental responsibilities. The Ambassador for Counter-Terrorism may be able to help you with
Great.
whether we're involved in the review in a more direct way.
Yeah, that's great. Either in an advisory capacity or whether you've got some direct responsibility.
Sure.
And yes, recognising that ASIO has carriage of the review formally. Please.
Miles Armitage, Ambassador for Counter-Terrorism. I presume the review you're referring to is of the Criminal Code listing,
Yeah.
which is under responsibility of the Attorney General.
Yeah.
DFAT is one of the departments involved in consultation in that process.
Okay. And that review process is underway now? It's commenced?
I can tell you, Senator, that the current listing of the PKK under the code is due to expire on the 18th of August this year. And whether or not the question of the renewal of that listing is a matter under consideration.
Thank you. Senator Brandis, just for the purposes of clarity, is it the case that unless a renewal is positively lodged, that the listing lapses?
Yes.
It is that's the case. Okay. Do reviews of allied countries operating on their own timetables and by their own criteria, are they taken into account when Australia, I guess not just in the case of the PKK, but are they taken into account when Australia is reviewing domestic listings?
Well, this is squarely a matter now within the Attorney General's area, and in particular a matter for ASIO, who provide advice to me as Attorney General in relation to these matters.
Okay. Is this something, Senator Brandis, and we're very fortunate to have you here at the table tonight, that you have had cause to give regard to thus far, or would you wait until a document is brought to your attention?
My approach, and I think it's the approach of attorneys from both sides of politics, it certainly should be, is to be guided in these matters by the specialists, and in particular by ASIO, who consult with others, with other relevant agencies.
Okay. As one of the relevant agencies before us tonight, and I'm sorry, gentlemen, I don't have a name.
Mr.
to
Armitage.
Sorry, I haven't got my name
It's,
plate.
it's Mr. Miles Armitage, the counter-terrorism ambassador.
Are you directly engaged in advising ASIO or providing briefing material of any nature in this
Look, I don't
review?
think it's really appropriate, Senator Ludlam, for us to talk about what may or may not be in preparation as advice to government. The listing expires, as I've told you, on the 18th of August. Naturally, that date being shortly upon us, this
Yep.
is a matter to which I don't think it's a secret that consideration is being given, but beyond that, I'm not really comfortable with the officials going.
All right. I'm happy to, because time is reasonably short, if you want to just take on notice the process that the department would take of gathering information. So, for example, you don't have to answer these directly now because we're going to throw to Senator Xenophon, whether you would speak to local representatives of the Kurdish community, for example, or what kind of open source, if you like, resources you would give regard to if you were assessing a listing or delisting. But I'll leave it there and throw back to the Chair.
Senator Ludlam. Senator Xenophon.